Sponsored by Taylor Freelance, Rainier Ballistics, Hodgdon Powders, and JPL Precision.
Hey everybody, welcome to this week's episode of Power Factor. For the next 3 episodes, we're actually going to be talking about target setting, looking at the different various trap machines, and then also the delay boxes that we talked about before on previous programs, and also put some photos up on Facebook earlier in the year. But for today's episode, I'm joined again by Dave Jeffrey and Lynn Curry, who you guys probably remember from the ever-popular Sporting Clays episode that we shot here. We're again here at Granite Falls Sportsman's Club in Granite Falls, Washington. And for this particular episode, we're going to talk about target setting. I really appreciate Dave and Lynn coming on the program, because you guys have been doing all the target setting here for how long?
Well, it's been now probably 5-6 years, maybe,
something like that.
Okay, so
maybe a touch longer, but
was that based out of necessity or a desire? I mean, was it a situation where you guys?
I think it was the case. The answer to that is yes.
Yeah.
There was a couple here, Jack and Carol Cornish, that had been carrying just a tremendous amount of the workload for a very long time, and they needed to step back. Jack is getting older, and Carol couldn't do it by herself, shouldn't have to do it by herself, and it was time for other people to step up.
Right.
So Lynn and I were kind of the ones that did so.
And the other thing, in fact, we're even seeing this in a lot of clubs around here, is basically just volunteering burnout. You know, that people just.
Oh God, very much so.
Yeah. I mean, you end up with a very small crew who are doing it, and you know, obviously we're all doing this for the enjoyment of it and the volunteer aspect of it. And if you end up with just a very few number of people, eventually they're going to get tired of doing it. So.
Yes, I've heard from several other clubs that are struggling to keep holding shoots just because the number of people that are willing to. But if somebody doesn't, then it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And I wish a wider group of people would step up and take it on, because it would be really nice to have it where the three of us aren't doing it every time.
Right. Yeah. We're kind of referred to as the Three Amigos around here. So should we do the Three Amigos? No, we won't do the Three Amigos.
No. I've also heard Evil Minions.
Other names, right? Yeah.
And those are the nice ones.
Right. Yeah. They don't. Yeah. We can't say what others said about us. So one of the other things that I was actually really impressed by, and I didn't know this even existed, but you and Lynn actually went to a target setting school. So I think you guys could kind of talk a little bit about that, what that was all about, what you learned from it, what you took away from it.
The course, or the venue that we went to, was predominantly on sporting clay shooting, but part of it was on course setting and reading targets.
Right.
Because in order to be a good sporting clay shooter, you have to be able to read targets, and if you understand that better, it helps you learn how to set targets better. Also, the course instructor had good points as far as you're not trying to beat a shooter. You're not out to try to beat them down and set a course that's unshootable by anybody. You're out there to set a course that's supposed to be fun but challenging.
Right.
And not everybody that's going to come out there is, a national champion.
And I would imagine that's the other challenge also in terms of setting courses, is you have your master AA shooters, and then you have your D&E shooters, and trying to set a course that is enjoyable and challenging for both can be a challenge.
Right. And so a blend of targets. Some of them are going to be complete cream puffs for the advanced shooters, and should be relatively comfortable for the new shooters. But there's also you want some thrown in that you're going to have to think about.
Yeah.
And that a experienced shooter is going to have to work at to be fully successful.
Right. So Lynn, what did you take away from that class?
Well, again, like we were talking about, the biggest thing is that if it's a 100-bird course you're shooting, they want your average to come out, for the average shooters to be in the 70s.
Okay.
So that, because then you know that the good shooters are shooting good, and even the lower class shooters, the beginners, are shooting good. And so you want to make it fair to everybody, and that's the big thing.
Right.
And what we learned too was to make sure that when we throw a target that the person has up to 3 seconds to see the target.
That's a good point. Yeah.
And because if you throw a target and they can only see it for a fraction of a second, nobody's going to hit it and nobody's not going to like it.
Right.
So if you can learn to give the 3-second rule, as long as they can be seen for 3 seconds, that's the big thing, is to be able to see it clearly for 3 seconds. It's tough to do sometimes.
Yeah, and exactly. Sometimes you can't just because of the lay of the land, so to speak.
Exactly. The lay of the land here at Granite has some fairly tight shooting windows, as has been shown in some of your other episodes.
Right.
And so we do what we can, but you don't want the same. I mean, I could do straight going away targets in all those shooting lanes, and that's going to get kind of boring.
Right.
So you try to keep the variety there, so you're not always able to follow that rule 100%, but you definitely want to try to give the shooter a good opportunity, and then it's up to the shooter to be able to read the target, see what it's really doing, and then be able to shoot it appropriately.
So you mentioned, we were kind of talking before about in terms of challenge. Do you have a formula or something that you try to strive for in terms of setting, let's say, a 100-board sporting clays event, of the kind of a mix of what you refer to as cream puff stations, really challenging killer stations, and then your average stations and whatnot? I mean, do you have kind of a feel for what you try to run for a mix in that? Or
so just using a 10-station course just as an example, I would probably try to set two stations that are pretty challenging, 2 to 3 that are pretty much, most people are going to get most or all the targets.
Right.
And then the rest of them as a mix thereof.
Right.
So that one of the birds is easy, one of the birds is more challenging.
Yeah.
Something along those lines, so that your average shooter is going to get one of everything at least, and preferably more. So that their scores are going to come into that. From if you take your high scores, your low scores, your average, everything together in that 7 range.
Right.
Because that's when you've kind of hit the mark.
Yeah.
I mean, we could set courses that are just horrid, but nobody's gonna like it.
Right. Yeah. And that's I think a key point is that you may set a course that you think is really interesting, but people don't have fun. And the thing is that you want them to have fun and come back.
Yeah. If they don't come back, well, you're gonna be up business pretty quick.
And it's interesting in that we have set courses where we felt that they would. A lot of times we set courses and you're like, this one's going to be difficult, and it turns out sometimes that you end up like really high scores being shot. We did completely the opposite, where we thought this course should be pretty easy. I mean, there's nothing here that really looks too difficult, and yet I've seen like the last shoot that we did, very low scores across the board.
Yeah, which it's from some very good shooters.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And yet, some of the weather conditions play into that.
True.
Lighting conditions, if it's overcast, affects your shooting one way. If it's bright sunlight, affects your shooting another. So, what you might set up the evening before can change dramatically just with the weather.
Right. Yeah.
Especially with our trees and everything, the lighting can have such a dramatic effect on what the shooter can see and how they can respond to it.
So so that's a good question then, is how do you deal with that? I mean, in situations where, I think the average age of, I don't know for a fact, but just what I've seen around, the average age of sporting clay shooters is probably between 40 and 60 years old. So when where obviously our eyes are beginning to hit that, magic.
Boys, that happened with me.
Yeah, where after 40, things start changing, and your vision goes, and so it can be very difficult, especially here in the woods, based on lighting and presentations and everything, but what can you do, or what do you do in order to make targets more visible? Do you have any general rules of thumb that you say, okay, I'm not going to do this with a target because I know it's going to be difficult to hit?
Yes. Things that you can do to increase show more face, meaning that you turn the target so there's more face showing to the shooter, gives them a better visual lockup on it.
Right.
Not throwing into huge changes in lighting if you have the opportunity. If you go from dark into bright sunlight, your eyes trying to change with that, it makes it a real challenge, or vice versa. Try to keep it in the same lighting scope the best that you can. Once again, we're in a treat environment here, and so there's a lot of strobing. Strobing will really have a tendency to make you lose lockup on the target.
Right.
And so trying to keep it out of those regions within the confines that we have to operate is definitely to the advantage. Using different colors of targets, black bottom target against the skyline actually works pretty well.
Which is hard to believe, but it actually is true. Yeah.
But you try to throw that in the woods, you'll be hung.
Yeah, right.
We're playing around with pink targets to see how that works. My father, interestingly enough, he's 80 and he still is an active shooter, and he could see the pink targets very well. I didn't. I found the oranges easier to see in the woods.
Yeah.
So,
but then
we're still
give it 30 years and we'll see how you feel.
Exactly.
Yeah, right.
So, white targets in certain environments, green targets in certain environments. It's interesting that the green targets actually show up fairly well in the green woods.
That's what I've noticed also.
It kind of seems counterintuitive, but that's not the case.
Right.
So color of the birds being thrown can play into it significantly.
Yeah. So Lin, do you have any favorite target presentations that you like to do, or like when you're setting a course or whatever of combinations? Do you have any favorites that you like to? If somebody's going to say, "Oh, Lin's been here."
I've been known to shoot. I've been known to set up some pretty good incoming targets. I've had a few comments.
Yeah.
And to me, an incoming target, if you got all the time in the world for, those are the ones you're going to miss.
That is a good point. Yeah.
Puts you to sleep.
And the people that pre-mount their gun on an incoming target, if it's a long ways out, you will end up getting tired and you're going to get bored and you probably will miss the target.
And start aiming.
You start aiming like a rifle. And,
right.
And for me, I've always pre-mount except for incoming targets, and then I do low mount on them, and I wait till they come close, and then I mount the gun and shoot it.
Yeah, I like your new technique of calling for it by looking in the opposite direction. And then,
It works sometimes.
Yeah, well, it's actually been working pretty good. But yeah, it's kind of funny. Like Lin's standing there, and the bird's coming from here at you, and he's like, "Okay, pull." Boom. So yeah, that's funny.
Anyway.
So what about you, Dave? Do you have any signature presentations that you would say that you are known for?
Oh, I try a wide variation. I've tried putting up some of our trap machines on forklifts to kind of a mobile mini tower.
Yeah.
I like to have targets that will appear from unusual places and kind of pop into view where you're not really expecting them to come from. They can be easy targets when they're there, but you just don't. It's hard to determine where it's coming from and have too much time to think about it in advance.
Yeah.
Using the mobile mini tower as an example, with a Batu that all of a sudden, because a Batu will come in flat and then turn, so it comes, you don't see where it's coming from, then all of a sudden here it is, it's flashed and it's dropping in front of you. And so things like that are kind of fun.
Yeah.
I like to try to do a wide variety. I like to try to have a lot of compound angle targets where the target is never in a straight plane at any one point in time. It's always twisting and always turning.
Right. Transitioning birds.
You do have a chromatic target that you made with a little flopping spring that is a killer.
Yeah, you should talk about that real quick.
Yeah.
So with our new chromatic machines that we got, I built a spring specifically for this, which is just a little floppy spring. There's no tension to it at all, and that can be a real surprising target because it can be either very easy or you can just drop right out from underneath you, and you end up.
Today, I was having problems with it.
Yeah, you have a tendency to shoot over the top of it. When it's an easy target, but it just dies so quickly that it's almost always in transition.
Yeah. I remember that one time we were shooting it, and somebody actually thought the machine was broken.
Yes.
And reported it as a broken machine. It's like going
by intent.
Yeah. Right.
Chromatic has some pink springs, which I'd like to acquire a couple of, so I'll order some of those up, which should do the same thing. But I actually just built this up out of garage.
Was it like a door hinge spring or
Exactly.
something? Yeah,
It's just something I got at the local hardware store.
Right. Yeah.
And just put some hooks on it, and it works pretty darn good.
Yeah.
So I want to try that with a Batu, and I haven't done that yet.
Yeah, I think that would be interesting to see what that would do.
I can get the Batu to curve as much as they do with a strong spring, because that could be very interesting. I could think of all kinds of new creations with that.
So I noticed one of the other things that you guys both do, and I like, is kind of playing between the two birds of speed or height or distance.
Yes.
So a lot of times you'll have like a very fast bird combined with a really slow bird, or you have a high bird combined with a low bird, or you have an outgoing bird and an incoming bird. Just combinations of that where the shooter is faced with two dramatic different between the two birds presentations. And I've heard that, one of the marks of a really good target setter, I shouldn't say is they're out to fool the shooter, but a lot of times they're trying to do things that may create optical illusions or be deceiving or cause people to misread birds.
Well, and
based on
being able to read what a target's really doing and make it a challenge to do that is kind of the art form.
Right.
And it's some of the what you pointed out is that one of the targets we think are going to be easy turn out to be very difficult because of that exact situation. Tree lines, elevation changes, your eye thinks that it's doing this, most of the time, by the time that you're on a target, it's actually descending. It's already reached its apex and is already coming down.
That's one of the things I remember that you taught me is that you've said, 90% of the targets in sporting clays are falling targets.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I remember when we went and had that course, the gentleman that was teaching it.
Who was the guy who taught that?
Mike McAlpine.
Okay, yeah, he's from
out of Texas.
Mike McAlpine is, if you follow Shotgun World, he's one of the guys on Shotgun World who posts in there quite a bit. So, really good guy.
Anyway, he was telling us about reading terrain, and he said he went out one time and he saw one of the guy that set the course was throwing a target, and it was just looked like it was going straight out. And he said he watched all these shooters come up and they kept missing it. And finally, he stood back and he realized that it was an open field, but he was throwing it with the terrain. Well, the terrain was dropping off 4 feet. But it looked like it was level.
Yeah.
And so everybody's swinging their gun across, and they were following the level and going right over top of it. And he says, and finally he walked up and told one of the guys, says, that's dropping 4 feet. And that gentleman was starting to hit him.
Yeah.
And I remember going down with Dave to another club, and we were out in a field, and they were throwing a target from left to right and right to left. And the terrain was unlevel, but the way they were throwing it, this one was throwing it uphill with it, and this was going downhill with the other side.
Yeah.
And Dave was having a hard time. I got up there and I run it, and I'm thinking, okay. And Dave gets up there and it's miss and a miss and a miss, and I'm going, Dave, what's the matter? And he goes, I don't know. And again, he was doing the same thing. He was throwing a target, and they have them called the magic box, and you take a shotgun shell box, take the bottom and the top out, and you hold it out there, and it gives you a level plane, and look at the target, and you can actually see the fall.
Right.
And we figured it out.
Yep.
But it took someone else to tell us probably, 2 or 3 years later, that's what it was. And so...
Yeah, I remember your use of the box when we were up at, it was one of the first times that I went up and observed at Top Gun, and there was a kind of a, targets were coming straight away from your left-hand side, but coming up a road that was sloped up. And the targets were coming in down like this, and people were reading, I think, the road, the fact that it was going above, so they're going over the bird. In reality, it was coming down. I remember you said, watch this, and you took the box, you said, watch what happens to the bird, and it literally came in from the corner of the box and went down the right-hand corner, in from the left high corner, down the lower right, and it's like going, it's a dropping target, but everybody was like looking at the road, going up, thinking that it's rising up the road, and it's not. It was literally being thrown flat and dropping all the way.
That was another one of the things that we picked up from Mike McAlpine. He's the one that showed us a little technique. And
right.
When it's when things are just not making sense, that's not a bad way to.
Yeah, and I've heard that also. It's like, when you are having trouble with a target, it is probably because of some trick that the target setter has used to deceive you and to make you in believing that it's doing something that it's not.
Yep.
Right. Yeah,
exactly.
that's a really good point. So when it comes to like setting, say, a practice course versus a registered shoot, do you have any change in philosophy of what you try to do there in terms of target target setting?
So much of it depends upon the shooting crowd that you're trying to cater to.
Yeah.
If you're trying to cater to shooters that are out there every weekend, and we're looking for a variety and looking for some challenging targets to practice for competitions, well, then you're going to set some pretty creative, pretty challenging targets. I mean, we do that around here sometimes. But if, we know that we have a group coming through that are beginning shooters, you want to soften things up. And there's amazing things. I think you've already had your the box that we all came up with. Talked about that, and
we'll talk about that later in one of the other episodes that we're going to do on the delay box.
Just being able to change the settings on that to give more time or the different presentation of the birds can change things dramatically.
Yeah. I know this is one of the things, and I'm probably guilty of this, but when it comes to setting for practice courses, I like to set things that I've had trouble with before in the past.
Exactly. That's if you're practicing. That's when you want to practice.
But unfortunately, I'm also setting what can be very, well, at least they are for me, because that's what I'm setting, but a challenging target. And I think kind of like what you're saying is that we may have shooters that are coming in here. The first thing they're in Granite Falls, and they just want to come out and shoot sporting clays. And unfortunately, they're looking at stations that we've set that are difficult, and they're going, crap, that's no fun.
But I think we also do it because we do set two separate courses here. We normally set one that's a little easier than the other. So we try to make one that's kind of easier for the beginner, and we have one that's more for the the mid-range and advanced people.
And new shooters that come out, we definitely try to spend the time with them if they want it. And we'll leave them alone if they don't, as long as they're shooting safely. But spend the time with them and try to help them along so that they have a good time, that they will want to come back.
And I think that's one of the things that Granite Falls is known for, is being a really friendly club. I mean, you see that in all the comments that are on the different shooting forums or it's Clay Targets USA or Clay Shooting USA or whatever. But it's one of the websites that's out there that the different clubs it's kind of reviews of clubs, and you go to the one for Granite Falls and they comment about how friendly everybody is here, willing to help out. So it's one of the things that we're known by. So one of the other things I was going to ask you about is true pair versus report pair. One of the things that I was kind of surprised at is that when we went up and shot Top Gun, I was expecting to see a lot of true pair targets. So just to go back, true pair is you hit either both buttons or both machines fire at the same time. And report pair is that the first bird is thrown, and when the shooter shoots at it and you go bang, then they throw the other bird. And I was really surprised at the number of report pairs that were being thrown at Top Gun, and I realized kind of after the fact is that it seemed like if the birds were either two birds going the same way, either coming at you, going away from you, going across, whatever, they would throw them as true. But if it was anything different about either left to right to left, things like that, they were throwing them as report. So do you have any kind of rule of thumb or philosophy or anything when you decide to go true pair versus report pair?
Well, true pair, you need to make sure that the shooter has time to...
Which is a 3 second.
Where the shooter has sufficient time to see and shoot at both birds.
Right.
If you don't, then you have not been fair. So you have to, if you have a presentation in mind, okay, how is it that's best done where the shooter has an honest opportunity to break the target. And that determines that a lot. I mean, if there's lots of time, it can actually work against a shooter if you have too much time.
Yes.
Because as Lin's talked about, incoming targets where you literally go to sleep on it.
Right.
On following pairs where we've set the delay at the maximum time, I actually can trick more shooters that way sometimes than because they wait and they relax and then the bird goes. And so they've made the first shot and they're expecting that other one, and now it goes. Because you do up to 3 seconds is what the rules allow.
Right.
And that can really mess with your mind. Especially people that have a tendency to pre-mount because they're waiting, and the gun's getting heavy. Where in those cases, for my own way of shooting, I'll take the gun off
the shoulder.
Shoot the first one, and then take the second one. Because otherwise I will go sleep. I'll start aiming.
Well, I also noticed, and I shoot better typically from a low gun like that, and in fact I learned that on a bet too. And And it was just a ton of time waiting. He's like, you shoot the first one, and it was a ton of time watching it come in. And if I mounted the gun and watched it all the way up to the point where I wanted to break it, I'd miss it. I finally just unmounted the gun, just inserted it where I wanted to break it, and would hit it. So, yeah. So what about you, Lynn? What, in terms of like true pair versus report, do you have anything that you usually go by?
I think Dave did it pretty good, but basically just making sure they just have the time to be able to see them. If it looks like it's going to be tight, we'll set a course on Friday or Saturday, excuse me, for Sunday in the afternoon, and a lot of times Steve will come along and we'll change it.
Yeah.
Just before we go to shoot, because we'll get up there and go, well, lighting conditions not really good now.
Right.
Compared to last night, we had a lot of sun. This morning there was more shade and clouds. Yeah, let's make it a report pair, because make it fair to everybody.
Yeah.
And that's what we're doing. We're not out here to get the lowest score we can out here on an average. We want it so everybody wants to come back.
You want them to be challenged, but you want them to have fun.
Right.
Yeah. And sometimes it can be kind of a difficult tightrope to walk between the two of them. But yeah, I noticed you've said before, if there's any question at all in your mind about it, throw it as a report.
Yeah.
There's actually been, so as an example, where I use the report to my advantage, or I should say an attempt. I'm not going to say to trick shooters, because that makes it sound like I'm being mean, but who? Me? Yeah. But last month we had a 47-yard, because I marked it off, I walked it, crossing rabbit and an outgoing bird, and you could easily have thrown them as a true pair. There was enough time on both. But I knew that if anybody would do that, they'd shoot the outgoing bird and then wait for the rabbit to slow down and die, effectively going a couple miles an hour. So now it's not very far target. So I thought, okay, well, that's the way everybody's going to shoot it. But if I throw it as a report pair first and throw the rabbit first, people are going to be really hot on the rabbit first as it comes off the machine, rather than waiting for it to go. Because it's report, they can wait all day long if they want to and let it go all the way to the point that it dies and shoot it. And sure enough, I watch people's like, bang, bam, like they'd miss. It's like you just wait for it to go out and die and then shoot it.
Down,
right.
It's an illegal target,
down,
makes it more vulnerable.
The only thing it did is it put you out of position for the next bird, because you were all the way over here when that one was thrown over here. But I just wanted to do that as an experiment to see what people would do, and sure enough, they walked right into the trap, and yeah.
But that was a fair.
Exactly.
Right.
Right. And I'm not trying to trick anybody, but it's also the way I look at it, it's a learning experience. You see it, and it's like, why didn't I think of that? So why didn't I think of that is also a good description of what you just did over here a few minutes ago. But anyway,
I've just learned a few things.
Yeah, we'll get there in a future episode. We'll remember that moment, and we'll revisit this discussion here shortly. So anyway. Okay, so I think that about does it on target setting. Again, I want to thank both of you for coming onto the program. If you have any questions for us or for Dave or for Lynn, you can send an email to powerfactorshow@gmail.com. You can hit the Facebook page, facebook.com/powerfactorshow, and our YouTube channel. I don't remember what that is, but I'm sure you do. So anyway, thanks again. And the next episode, we're going to be talking about trap machines, taking a look at them, what we have here at Granite Falls, how we use them, how we can adjust them, and so on and so forth. So thanks again, and we'll see you next time.